Perhaps, as I have said to my friend, Dr. Kim Kumba, I don't think that I have ever been in a room with so many brains and so many giants of knowledge, except perhaps the time that I was in a room with Wally Soyinka, the late Chinua Achebe, Molara Ogundepe, Kofi Asari Opoku, and if not then, perhaps, as I said, being in the room in 1981 with Sheikh Anta Diop in Dakar. Sheikh Anta Diop, you should know, is perhaps the most important African intellectual of the 20th century. So I rushed up to him in 1981 at his office and said, "Professor Diop, I want to be like you. I want to defend Africa." And he said to me, "Young man, Africa needs no defense. We must advance. Advance, advance." So when I accepted this invitation to come to you and talk with you about a narrative of African science that would in some way connect us to what has always been going on in the continent of Africa. So this narrative that I give you is based fundamentally on chronology and etymology. Chronology is always important, and you as scientists know this, that if you are doing science, normally you want to at least cover the basis by looking at what has already been done. And from that, you are able to say that your particular mechanism or technique is original or new or different or will add to the long discourse of whatever particular science you happen to be in. So chronology is always important. Etymology is important because we want to know what things mean. We want to index them. The question is the question of indexicality. What context is this in, and how do we mark it for use by human beings? So to give this narrative, I always like to start at the very beginning, chronologically. That Homo sapiens arise only in one continent. The speciation that brought into being Homo sapiens arose here on the continent of Africa, nearly 300,000 years ago. Nowhere else. And all of the hominins that existed prior to the rise of Homo sapiens came from this continent, from the African continent. Whether you start at the very first Sahelanthropus chadensis, 7 million years ago, or we start with Homo sapiens themselves, 300,000 years ago, here in this continent is the beginning, the origin of humanity. There is no polygenesis. There's only monogenesis. And those early Africans on this continent were the ones that gave us the very first knowledge of how to cross a stream, how to survive a storm, what to eat and what not to eat, what would kill you, what would make you sick, or what will give you energy and strength. They discovered all these things. So the fundamental discoveries of the earth, of Homo sapiens, of human beings, those fundamental discoveries were discoveries that were made right here on this continent. And human beings lived on this continent for 2/3 of the time that human beings have been on the earth. We didn't leave this continent until maybe 70,000 years ago. All human beings on the earth, the 8 billion human beings on the earth today, all came from here. And if we know that, and we understand that that is the very origin, that the early Africans, the people on this continent as Africans, worked out the very beginnings of humanity in terms of how to deal with the environment, how to deal with each other, what to put into our bodies and what not to put into our bodies. If we work those things out here, we work chronologically at the very beginning of human science. It was here that we did that, before we went out of the continent. And of course, everybody didn't leave. But before Africans left the continent to go all over the world, to populate the world, right here on this continent, all of the fundamental values were worked out. Now, of course, for some people this is problematic, but it is fact. We have to understand that if at the very beginning of our understanding of history, we have the beginning of science with Imhotep, a name that should ring in the ears of all people and should be at the very beginning of human knowledge. And so I ask sometimes the question, why is it that African children do not start their studies with Imhotep, the first multidimensional human who ever lived? There was no human that we know of, which there's a record of, who was before Imhotep as a scientist. He was not only the first scientist, he was the first builder of a pyramid, the Saqqara pyramid. He was the first physician. He was even deified and honored and worshiped, the first human ever deified as a god was Imhotep, a black man right here from the continent of Africa. Very beginning of science. He was not only an advisor to the Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the ancient name for what was changed to Pharaoh, but the Pharaoh, the great house. He was not only an advisor, but he was also a poet himself. He wrote the Harvest Song. He was considered one who knew everything that there was possible to know during his lifetime. Imhotep. So I always say that you begin with Imhotep. And why do we do this? We begin with Imhotep because chronologically it's important. 2600 BC, before the Christian era. 2,600 years before Jesus Christ. And we have not lived 2,600 years this side of Jesus Christ. And he lived 2,600 years before Jesus Christ. He lived 2,000 years, 2,600 years before the Christian era, and about 3,100 years before Muhammad. This is Imhotep. Why is it that we don't know his name? Why is it that our children are not schooled and know something about him from the very elementary grades? Imhotep, the father of science, the very beginning. And I give you Imhotep for a number of reasons, because I understand that there are other ways that people look at knowledge. And there are other things that people say, but the very beginning, you have to start with Imhotep. The first science we normally say is philosophy. That philosophy is the first science. But it's very interesting. When people say philosophy, they don't normally mean anything about Africa. In fact, when people talk about philosophy, they mainly talk about Greeks. They're not talking about Africa, right? And they say, well, the word philosophy means one who is a lover of wisdom. So the only people who are supposed to have given the world philosophy were Greeks, Europeans, not Africans. And yet we know that the word philo is from the Greek. But the dictionary of etymology tells you that the word Sophia, that its origin is unknown. It is only unknown if you do not know classical Africa. The word Seba, meaning the wise, is an African word. It is that word that Sophia comes from. So the Seba, so what some people have done is to say, well, okay, the Africans don't have philosophy, but they have wisdom teachings. Nobody else has philosophy but the Greeks. This is a sort of the exclusionary notion that only there is an exception, because in the minds of those who created that narrative, the only people who could logically think were Greeks. Native Americans, for example, they had legends. The Chinese perhaps had the sayings of Confucius. But philosophy is Greek. Well, that's a false narrative. That's a very false narrative. I gave you, that's why I started with 2600 BCE. In 2600 BCE, there is no Greece. In 2600 BC, not only is there no Greece, there is no Rome. In 2600 BC, you have Imhotep. And then you have other philosophers. And I gave you the names. I give you the names of some of them. Kagimni, Merikari, Amenemhat, Amenemope. These were the philosophers who lived, and I put the dates alongside their names, right? So you'll know. So I hope to bring 1992 BCE, 1,992 years before the Christian era. And in fact, are all of those philosophers, African philosophers, classical African philosophers. And I have to say classical African philosophers because sometimes people get confused. Kemet and Kush are to Africa and African cultures as India and China are to Asia, as Greece and Rome are to Europe. And these African classical civilizations existed long before there was any Greek philosophy. There is no Greek philosophy in any period there, not at all. And yet these were philosophers. That's why in my book, The Egyptian Philosophers, I talk about it. These are the first scientists, the first thinkers that really tried to figure out things, to try to understand nature, to understand human behavior. These were the Africans who did that. Now, when do we get the first Greek philosopher? We get the first Greek philosopher 600 BC. 600 BC, that's 2,000 years after Imhotep. The first philosopher from Greece is Thales. Thales of Miletus. 600 BC. He's not the first Greek voice we hear. The first Greek voice we hear is Homer. And we hear Homer in 800 BCE. 800 BCE, there is the Iliad. This is from Homer. But neither Homer nor Thales had any understanding of much about what was going on before, except that they honored it. They appreciated what the Africans had done. Thales was a student of the Africans. So people say, well, how did Thales get to be a philosopher? He studied in Africa. He was the first student of the Africans was Thales, 600 BC. The second student of the Africans was Pythagoras. Pythagoras, when he was 19 years old, he went to Thales and said to Thales, I would like to learn philosophy like you. And Thales said to him, this is according to Plutarch, Thales said to him, you must do as I have done. He was an old man by now. You must do as I've done. He said to Pythagoras, you must go to Africa and learn from the priests. And Pythagoras spent 22 years in the Nile Valley in Kemet. 22 years. You can get a PhD, maybe 2 PhDs by that time, right? 3, maybe. He studied philosophy. And he didn't do the theorem until after he left Africa. This is very important to know because you need this narrative as scientists. That Pythagoras goes to Africa. He learns from the Africans, and then he creates a theorem. There's a book by George G.M. James that's called Stolen Legacy. He talks about this. He says there is no Greek philosophy, there's only stolen African philosophy. There's a book by Martin Bernal called Black Athena. 2 volumes, major work, where he details the study by the Greek philosophers of African philosophy. This is the very beginning. And in this formulation, Africa is no junior sister or brother. This is at the very heart, the very beginning of human sciences, the philosophy that comes to us through these various philosophers. Probably the only one up there that most people remember is Akhenaten. And they remember him because of the heresy that he brought to Kemet with the notion of the one God, which of course had already existed in Kemet before him. I mean, this was a dispute. This was, I call it, a temple dispute. You know how people have religious disputes. This was a religious dispute, but the ancient Africans in Kemet, and the name Egypt, by the way, is a Greek name. Egyptus is what the Greeks call Kemet. The Africans wrote in their text Kemet. But the Greeks asked people, what do they call those temples up here? And the people said, those are the temples of Ptah. So they say, well, these are the houses of Ptah. They put Egyptus, you see. But no, that's not the name. The name, and one of the things we have to do as scientists, because we are thinkers, we have to always try to call things by their name, by what people have called them. That's a big problem in the continent. It's a big problem in the world, and largely because the people who conquered lands also conquered information about lands. They not only colonized the land, they colonized all the information. And they changed the names of the places where you think that this place is called this. Oh, no, this is not called that anymore. We call this, you see. And in Africa, particularly in the Nile Valley, this has happened over and over again. The ancient city of Waset, the greatest city in the ancient world was Waset. It has had 3 or 4 names. The Greeks called it Thebes. The Arabs, when they conquered, called it Luxor. But the Africans called it Waset. That was the beginning. That's the greatest city in all of the classical world was Waset. This is the same with the city of Menefer, that the Greeks changed the name of Menefer to Memphis. You see, Memphis is not an African name. That's a Greek name. The name Menefer was the name of that second great city along the Nile River. So it's extremely important for us to have a narrative that we can understand, that also shows us that what you are doing and the work that you're engaged in as African scientists is work that is extremely central to part of what we understand about the world. I think I am, so what did these philosophers teach? What did these early scientists teach? They taught philosophy, they taught astronomy, they taught mathematics, geometry, medicine, architecture, anatomy and physiology, acoustics and music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They taught everything. This was their beginning. The oldest book of medicine in the world is the Ebers Papyrus. E-B-E-R-S. Ebers Papyrus. Oldest book of medicine. This is at the very beginning of medicine. It's an African book. There's no book about medicine, about diagnosis, about remedies before this. The very foundation. So if we're doing medicine, as a person engaged in that process, I must understand that I am participating in something that has gone on for millennia on this continent. The first book of medicine that we have is the Papyrus Ebers. And then there were others, because of course even before Ebers you had the physician Imhotep. But look at this. The first book of that dealt with astronomy. The first writings that dealt with astronomy were African. Why do we know this? Because a lot of people wrote about it. The Greeks wrote about it. Plutarch. Plutarch says, and he quotes Isocrates, not Socrates, but Isocrates, who was before Socrates. He quotes Isocrates, who writes in a book called Bucerus that in Egypt I studied medicine and astronomy. So the very beginning, when you talk about stargazing, they were not just gazing at the stars. They studied the heavens. What's the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that because of this study, they were able to give us the calendar that we now use. This is the African calendar. The calendar we're using now, right? 365, 66 days. This is the African calendar. How did they come up with that calendar? They came up with that calendar because every year the Nile River overflowed its banks. And when the flood came, they noticed after many years, the people noticed something. Every time the Nile River overflowed its bank, you could look on the horizon and see the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. They said, that's kind of peculiar. Every time you see the star Sirius, you know the flood is right around the corner. It's going to come soon. So they looked at this for years. And then they said, so let's count the number of days from one rising of Sirius to the next. And then sometimes they were off by 4 or 5 days. You know, they said, well, flood is here, but we don't see the star. Or the star is here, but we don't see the flood. So those days they call holy days. That's how we get holidays. They call them holy days. Those 4 or 5 days, they say, let's have celebrations. Let's have festivals. Let's be thankful until we see the culmination of the heliacal rising of Sirius, or what they call Sapdet, was the name of the star by the ancient Africans. We see Sapdet and we see the flood. We know that now the year can begin. That's the calendar we have, given to us by the African scientists themselves, who were able to see that. Geometry, the very beginning of geometry is the same. How do we get geometry? How do we get the measurement of the earth? That's what it means. How do we get measurement of the earth? You got the measurement of the earth because when the floods came, the floods washed away all of the territory that a farmer had. You didn't know how much land the person had. So what you had to do, you had to measure the land before the floods came. You had to stretch ropes. It's called rope stretching. You stretch the ropes, and you got the angles, and you got the land, and then when the flood left, you could give the person the same amount of land she or he had before the flood. That was the beginning of geometry. It was the very beginning of the creation of the pyramids. You can't create the pyramids without geometry. You can't create the pyramids without mathematics. These are essential aspects of it. This is the very beginning of it. And this is why it makes no sense to me why science wants to start with the Greeks when the Greeks are not even around at this time. The very first pyramids, the pyramid itself, probably not Homer's writings, not Homer, but the pyramid should be at the very beginning of all knowledge. Why? Because in ancient times, nothing encapsulated the idea of knowledge and wisdom any more than the pyramid. The pyramid structure, and I've been into the pyramids. I used to take groups for about 10 years. I took groups to Egypt. One of the interesting things when you go to Kemet and you go inside some of the pyramids, not all of them, some of them have almost no writing. But if you go into some of them, like the Pyramid of Pepi, Teti, what you will see is that there's writing everywhere because the people were recording knowledge, information. They were writing it everywhere, on the ceiling, on the walls. Everywhere you go, you would see it. You cannot go down into a pyramid without or into a pyramid without seeing this. It was the same way with the tombs. So the knowledge, all of the combination of information was right there. Even to the point when you start talking about anatomy and physiology, the mummification itself was the source of this. You had to study the body, the physical body. And you had to know what you were taking out or leaving in. This was essential for mummification. And they studied this. This was the origin. This was African science at the very beginning. So I give you this background as a classical background to an understanding of what we mean when we start talking about it. Who were some of the people who studied not only Pythagoras, but Plato, Anaxagoras, Anaximander, Democritus, Solon, the so-called giver of laws of Athens? They all studied in Africa. These were African students. They studied with them. They learned from them, from the Africans. And you did not have a golden age in Greece until after the Greeks had studied in Africa. And Africa, by the time that Greece had the first golden age, ancient Kemet had at least 3 golden ages. You see? But they don't tell you that. They don't give you that narrative. So you're a scientist, but you don't know the narrative necessarily of how the history evolved in terms of what Africa had already done. Now, I give you this, but I want to give you a couple of other things. That at one time, the city of Alexandria became the center of science in the ancient world. And it's always puzzled me about the city of Alexandria. Number one, the city was not Alexandria in the beginning. The city was Rakostis. It was renamed and given the name Alexandria after the conquest by Alexander. The general Ptolemy gave it the name Alexandria after Alexander, but the ancient city was Rakostis, right? So now in Rakostis, what happened over the years in the conquest was around 333 BC, before the Christian era. That's when the Greeks came, conquered Egypt, 333 BC. And when they are there, and they are ruling, and the Ptolemaic family is ruling, what happens is that they change the language so that people are no longer speaking Chicam. Chicam is the language of Kemet. They're not speaking that, which is, we all sometimes call it Medu-Necha, but I like to call it Chicam because it's a language that I teach at Temple. But Chicam because Chi meaning language of Kemet, basically. When they change that so that people are not really writing in Chicam, but they're writing in Greek. They're writing in Greek. It's almost like a conquest. I shouldn't say this, but like the conquest of Nigeria or any other conquest by the British. Now we speak in English, right? You know, we write in English, but we may have been writing in Yoruba or Hausa or some other language before that, but we're writing in English. So when the Greeks conquer the area and they rename Alexandria, and people start writing in the Greek language, some people confuse the fact that they're writing in the Greek language that these people are Greeks. They say, oh, these are Greek. Wait a minute. No, you can be a Nigerian and write in English, right? You had Egyptians who not only wrote in Greek, but who also changed their names to Greek names. Just like you can have Nigerians who change their name to John and Bob and Mary. And so you can have that. And you had that. And the reason I give you that background is because it's a crazy thing. These were the philosophers who lived in or around Alexandria. Eratosthenes was actually born in Cyrene, which is in Libya. But again, is a part of that whole group of Alexandrian people. Diophantus, Heron, Hypatia, Euclid, Menelaus, Pappus, Claudius Ptolemy, Plotinus, and Arius. These are just some. This was when Alexandria was the center of mathematics. And Heron, of course, as you know, is credited with creating 100 machines, different kinds of mechanical instruments. He's that great. And Hypatia, the first known, written about woman of mathematics was an African woman, Hypatia. This is important. You know, the thing is that this is out of a history. What is the history? The history is the relationship between men and women in ancient Kemet, and it's also an idea that women were not looked down upon as inferior to men. That Hypatia was herself one of the great geniuses of mathematics in her era. But of course, she was murdered. Who murdered her? The Christians. They killed her. Because why should she have this knowledge? Why should she be teaching people, men even, this information? She was not only the first female mathematician that is written about in history, she was also the first female intellectual who was murdered that we know about. This is a African woman mathematician in the 2nd century, this era, not before Christ, but after Christ. Hypatia. It's very important to know that. Plotinus Some people call the Neo-Plato, but Plotinus was born in Africa. All of these philosophers and scientists, all of them lived and died in Africa. They didn't go to Greece, didn't live in Greece. They wrote in Greek, but they didn't go to Greece. They didn't live in Greece. They lived only in Africa. That is the center. That's the place where we find them. So that's extremely important. I'm going to try to, I know my time is short, so I just want to go quickly. I got only 5 minutes, so let's go quickly here. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop. This is Sheikh Anta on his way to school at the Sorbonne when he was 19, from Senegal. He wrote a book called The African Origin of Civilization, which had a great inspiration for me. The African Origin of Civilization. It has become much more popular in the U.S. Long after he's dead and long after it was written. He had a big problem getting his PhD at the Sorbonne because what he did, and why I call him the greatest African intellectual of the 20th century, is because he turned science. He went to school to be a physicist, but he ended up being a historian, and he turned science upside down. His question, the question that he always asked was, what is the classical African civilization? What was it in Africa that actually contributed to other civilizations in Africa? What can I find in my culture, my Wolof culture in Senegal, that relates to the classical civilization? He did these studies, incredible studies. And he eventually, because of the support of Madame Curie's brother, was able to get his doctorate. And he wrote a book called Civilization of Barbarism. He wrote 23 books, very significant books. If you get a chance, please read them. Many of them are translated into English now. But so what does Sheikh tell us? He tells us that, number one, not only is Africa the origin of human civilization, we say sometimes it's the origin of humanity, but it's also the origin of human civilization. So his book, Civilization of Barbarism, goes to prove that. And he talks about the matriarchy. This is something we don't talk about much. That the real first hierarchy is patriarchy. But matriarchy wasn't. Matriarchy was a complementarity between males and females. And at the very beginning of human history, you had the woman being the nurturer and being, that the family revolved around the woman. This is very important for us in these days and these times, you see. And so this was extremely significant, where he starts Civilization of Barbarism with this notion of the matriarchy. That's the beginning. And so he gets to two cultures: the northern cradle culture of Europe and the southern cradle culture that comes out of matriarchy. And he begins to develop his science from there. It's extremely important that you read Sheikh Anta Diop as a scientist and understand where you fit in the whole picture of the narrative of African culture. 100,000 years ago, the African people built something that was called Inzalo Ilanga. And I went to visit Inzalo Ilanga, yeah. I just want to put it here. That's me and Professor Simpiwe Sisanti from the University of the Western Cape. We're visiting Inzalo Ilanga. This was in Mpumalanga region of South Africa. I read about it on the plane, and I said, I got to go see this because I want to see everything. I want to see I want to see the built culture of Africa. And so I go there, and this is an area where actually there are, some people estimate maybe 20 million megaliths. And some of these megaliths, particularly if you take into consideration what was in Mozambique and what was also in Zimbabwe, these stone structures, whether they are stelae or whether they are stone structures like the Great Zimbabwe, what you discover is that 100,000 years ago, humanity in Africa built these things, stood them up. And what are they standing up for? What are they related to? It seems that some theorists have said they're related actually to the stars, that this is a part of astronomy. Now, some other people have said that if you go to the Tassili caves in Algeria or the Ineti caves in Chad, you'll see the same thing on the walls of the cave paintings 40,000 years ago. But this is 100,000 years ago. Here in this country, in Nigeria, you have the Eredo Sangbo's trench that was built around a city in the Ijebu region. That's the largest man-made project in history. It's right here in Nigeria. Eredo, Ijebu, Bilikusu, Sangbo built this. You remember, you've heard of fortification. Europe built forts. The Africans built trenches around their cities. Trenchification, fortification, trenchification. Built a huge, huge trench around Ijebu. You can see this, you see. But you can also see these stelae here. And I got 2 minutes. Nabta Playa, Boval and Brophy, they wrote a book called Black Genesis. Black Genesis. The African origin, the black African origin. These are two white guys, wrote a book called The Black African Origin of Ancient Egypt. Black Genesis. And where do they go? They go and they find stelae in Nabta Playa, which is near the Chad border. You see, in Egypt and Libya. So this is extremely important. Where is this? Lothagam, North Pillar, near Lake Turkana in Kenya. The same thing where these ceremonial operations are going on 10,000 years ago. And then, of course, the Giza Plateau, the pyramids, 2600 BC. I'm just coming down. This is the trench. That's Eredo. Bilikisu Sangbo's trench, built in 800, year 800. It goes for over 100 miles. Okay, well, and this, of course, Zimbabwe. I lived in Zimbabwe, and I was one of the first Americans to write articles about the great Zimbabwe. And this was very interesting about Zimbabwe because there was a dispute, and there's always dispute as to whether or not aliens built this. You can only come up with that kind of thinking if you believe that Africans were incapable. And of course, a lot of Europeans believe that. That's part of the ideology. That, oh, no, Africans could never have done this. It had to be aliens, you see. But this is extremely important. So, all right, I thank you for my time, and I hope that you can read my paper. I think I wrote a 40-page paper for this lecture, so if you get a chance, you can read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Molefe, for that wonderful exposition. There's a school of thought that says that after a keynote address, you don't ask questions because it's just keynote, just to set you to think. However, I'm just wondering whether there are burning issues, either questions or contributions, and I'll limit it to just 2 people because of time. For me, what he has told us, or his conversation with us this morning, is to take us back to when, I hope many of you at your 700 level, at the doctoral level, you read the history and philosophy of science. What it's just telling us is that we should rewrite the whole curriculum on the history the history and philosophy of science for us to learn. A lot of us are just learning some of them this morning. So I'd like to give just 2 people the time to make one comment and another a question. If you will do me a favor to reduce everything you want to say to 1 sentence, it will be great. So I give you the floor now. The first sentence, yes, sir. Could you give him the microphone, please?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Prof, for that wonderful presentation. In fact, I've learned so much from this talk. And as Prof was giving this presentation, I begin to wonder, it all started here. So where did we really go to sleep that our continent is, where we are today? I would expect that with this wonderful knowledge and all that has happened over the millennium, we should be far, far, far ahead of where we are now. So where did we get it wrong as a continent? That today we are just at the very, low level of the wrongs.
Thank you. I guess that question is not for Prof alone, but for every one of us to look into. Yes, please, the second question or comment.
I hope the slides, each and every one of us will go home with these slides. Show it to our children, share it with our students, and let us all discover where we went wrong. But I don't think we went wrong. We need to discover that a very gene in the foundation of the first African remains in us. And if development is actually gene and the environment, and we still have the same gene, then we must change the environment to meet our potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Professor Mulete is around for the whole part of the conference if you want to have any chat with him or discuss with him. How I wish we had a time. We extended the whole conference for another day where you have a day's workshop on the history and philosophy of science as engendered by Africans. But I think what again you have just told me from the 2 people, one said just before you went out, sir, that you gave us this fantastic story of how civilization and indeed Africa, science started in Africa. Indeed, that AAS can trace its history to Imhotep, what you said. Now, if we started, even here, right here, if we started from Imhotep, where did we go wrong? What has happened to us? That's what he's saying. I'm sure you have the chance to say 1 or 2 things. But I believe what, again, they have said, the 2 of them said, is that perhaps AAS should begin to parcel some of the things we've heard into courses. AAS course 101, History and Philosophy of Science from Science. And anybody can take it anywhere, and you now earn your grade anywhere in the university in Africa. So you get an E-badge. Even for us attending this conference, you should have an E-badge for attending, and it should, for the postgraduate students, for the postdoctoral, it should count as a 2-credit course for whatever they are doing. That is what we've just had. Please join me in giving a resounding gratitude to Professor Mulete. Thank you very much. Somebody just said, are you bringing back your house to Africa? Because we really need to bring them home. And you should be the first person to help us bring all the others home. They took us away as slaves. They took the best, so-called, because they could travel six months in the sea without dying. They still left the best, which they didn't know. And unfortunately, we are now on our own, sending ourselves as the best out there. There's a time to come back home. Thank you very much. We need to continue the presentations today, the conversations, and this is focusing on how science academies can cooperate to promote development in Africa. And we have 4 to 5 people to do the presentation, and they will have 15 minutes each to tell us what they have in mind. Let me read the names, and if you are one of them, please come up to take your seat this way. The first person is Dr. Evans Avedi. If you are here, please come up. The next person is Professor Dorothy Ngila. The next one is Professor Christian Achema. Looks like, well, okay. The next one is Professor Gabriel Ogumola. And the last one on my list, oh, thank you. The last one on my list is Professor Wale Tomori. So if you are here, please come over. I will announce the names again. Dr. Evans Avedi, Professor Dorothy Ngila, Professor Christian Achema, Professor Gabriel Ogumola, and Professor Oyewale Tomori. Please come up and take any of the seats, including mine, if you wish. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, it seems that we have just 2 people. What it means is that we have more time for discussion, and we actually give them extra time. So you have 20 minutes to just tell us what you feel, so that we can leave the time for a lot of discussions. And I know you guys, Professor, including my very good friend, Tomori, he has more to say after presentation than even during presentation. And he says, in most of your presentations, and I think that's what Professor Gumola will also say, is that stop addressing the problems of Africa, but start undressing them. And I guess what we're going to do today is to undress the issues that lie within the academia, and making sure that the academies will cooperate to promote Africa. So without further ado, may I have the pleasure to call on Professor Gabriel Ogumola to make a presentation on the Nigerian Academy of Science, its history and experiences in intercontinental cooperation. I guess you're free for the 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Dear colleagues, the president of the African Academy of Science, officers of the Academy, distinguished fellows of the African Academy of Science. I'm sorry about my throat. I extend my greetings on this occasion of your conference in Abuja. I also welcome the considerable members of the Nigerian Academy of Science who are also fellows of the African Academy of Science. And as many of you are here, and my colleagues, that I can see you've organized a coup at the beginning of this, deliberately or interestingly. The two of us who are to address you today happen to be past president of the Nigerian Academy of Science. Welcoming, so my distinguished President, Professor Tomari, is also to speak after me. Well, this is a very important meeting and very important occasion for that matter. And my presence here is facilitated by Friday Okonova, because he's one person whom I will never say no to because of my tremendous respect for him. I pleaded with him whether I could give this participation online, and he insisted that I should come, that he was sure many people would like to share their experiences together. And I found that particularly very fascinating. It's been a very wonderful conference. I think the scientific density or density of eminence per square inch is the heaviest the world can have, and is now right at Abuja with all these eminent participation. It's by providence that we've all been challenged to come and listen to these great men and to share experiences. So we are at this conference to explore the pivotal role of academies as institutions for national and continental development. And I am asked to present to you the Nigerian Academy of Science as a case study evaluating the role it has played in shaping scientific enterprise and policy in Nigeria and beyond. My speech could have been given by Professor Tomari. That's why I say you arrange a coup. Even if I was not here, most of what I would be saying, he could easily have said it as well. But very interesting. With the recent recognition, I'm sorry I have something in my throat. I hope you pardon me if I spent yesterday evening online watching the ceremony of the Nobel Award. And of course, okay, yes. Thank you. Maybe that will help. Okay, thank you very much. Well, it was December 10, we all know where to be, and it's the aspiration of every scientist to one day be at that spot. And yesterday was December 10. And Darren Asemogu and Simon Johnson and James Robertson were receiving the Nobel Prize for Economics. They won the prize, and the prize really highlighted how their essential theory surrounding the formation of institutions and its influence on societal prosperity will impact the value of academies as institutions in national, regional, and global development. We do need institutions to build nations, to build continents, and to build the world. And academies are variable institution with which to build nations, to build continents, and to build the world. So we're here for a very, very important engagement and sharing our experiences at this time is quite, because we've really, by science, by practice, it's been demonstrated. This very institution of academies in our nation, on our continent, is definitely needed for the advancement of our nation. And so we're at this conference, therefore, to be able to engage ourselves. Nations are built by enduring institutions, and nations also fail from the absence of institutions. And this now has been well established. The Nigerian Academy of Science was inaugurated on January 8, 1977. That's 47 years ago. Some of us were present when these were being formed. We didn't think we would one day even be challenged with the leadership of such academy. We have towering figures like Professor Victor Yenuga, a great agriculturist, agricultural nutritionist, who became the first president of the academy in 1947. The total initial group of the foundation fellows were 45 foundation fellows, which has grown to 233, covering all areas of sciences, technology, medicine, engineering. The debate at that time was whether to name it Nigerian Academy of Sciences, and they insisted that they would follow the dictum, one science and many applications. So it retains its name as Academy of Science, standing in for all the sciences. But of course, at that time, it did not include the social sciences. And I think we're still grappling with that issue till today. There, of course, the Academy started as a national academy, but has in its statute the scope for engaging foreign fellows. And today, the Nigerian Academy of Science has 4 fellows. And the 4 fellows on the academics list today are Professor Bruce Albert, former president of the U.S. Academy of Science, the Egyptian Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, Professor Ahmed Ziwel, the Nobel laureate, and Professor Mike Clegg, and Professor Christian Happy from Cameroon, but who is doing wonderful work here in Nigeria. Other academies, such as those in engineering, social sciences, education, medicine, have since been established in Nigeria, and they are functioning well in their contribution to institutional building in the mission as academy. And I have just that slide before this. Well, these are the list of past presidents, starting from Professor Yenuga, and these were giants, not only in Nigeria and this continent. I think the roll call is Professor Umechili, Umaru Shehu, Morvan, Njoku Obi, Oladapo, Olaniyan, Rosete, Adegbola, Madame is there, Professor Salako, Professor Anya, Arthur Animalu, myself name just included, Ogumola, Professor Kali, Professor Ibida Kwabe, Professor Wale Tomori sitting down here, and Professor Mutsu, Onoha. Then we can have the next slide, which shows the picture of our current president, Professor Ekanamike Braid, who is the current president, and regrettably it took us 40 years to have the first female to head the academy, but we did it. And here we have Professor Braid being the current president of the academy. Next slide. Okay, that's Professor Ziwal in the Nigerian Academy of Science gown. He was so proud of this, of receiving this award from us. And I know his passion, he's late now, his passion to see that Africa must be developed by all of us from wherever we are. Next slide. Well, the academies interestingly, the Grand Patron of Science is supposed to be the president of our nation, and we had 3 presidents who had fulfilled their responsibility in that position, and today we've been able to have the current president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu, GCFR, accepting to be, and he has since been inducted as the Grand Patron of Science. We must have, please, can I go back in that slide? Go back, go back, go back, go back, go back. That's what Yenuga, go back, okay. This was the induction ceremony of the Nigerian president, bringing us closer to government with him. And we hope that the Academy, in national responsibility and international engagement, will receive some booster. He willingly accepted being installed as the Grand Patron of the Academy. So we can say that the Academy is moving closer to the government. Okay, thank you. You can go back to. Well, the vision of the Academy is, well, I mean, first of all said, do I need to repeat it? Because it's well documented on our website. But essentially, the Academy has been able to enable and improve quality of life for Nigerian society through the promotion and application of science and technology, along with evidence-based policy advice to government and the people of Nigeria. An essential vision and our mission is that all these objectives were to provide the growth and acquisition and dissemination of scientific knowledge and facilitate its use in solving major problems of the country. And the Academy achieves all this through providing advice on scientific problems, on scientific nature at different levels to different governments, the federal, the state, and local government as well. Well, the activities of the Academy, can we have the next slide? Publication of scientific literature, award of prizes, next slide. The compelling rationale for directing the energy of the Academy, the Nigerian Academy of Science from the beginning, has been the need to mobilize and nurture national need. ability to use the tools and science effectively to build the necessary capacity for the purpose of delivering its mandate to the people. And the Academy has its many branches. Next slide. And publications of scientific literature through our editor, and the award of prizes. Academy awards many prizes, and one of the most prestigious of our prizes has been the NASA Gold Medal Award, which is given on an annual basis, and it rotates within physical and biological sciences. Award is really the gold medal prize for achieving excellence in scientific endeavor. Providing advocacy to government and so on and so forth, nurturing and strengthening the capacity of the young ones, and so on. Now, one of the most significant things that has happened to us is that we celebrated the 25 years of the Academy in Abuja here. And during that time, we had the engagement of my clerk, who was then the Foreign Secretary of the US Academy. And we got talking, and this is what led eventually to the ASADI program that we participated in with other academies on the continent of Africa. And the ASADI program has been a major turning point into many academies on this continent, and did promote collaboration among the academy because of the initiatives of developing the capacity of different academies. I think there were 3 or 4 of the academies in Uganda, South Africa, Nigeria that participated in the program, and the program was actually very, very successful. And from that, capacity were built, training were effected, and the improvement in the delivery of our services really. So from that 25th anniversary interaction, this is the Abuja Center, and we hope that our presence here today will shape a new vision of collaboration and partnership between the African Academy of Science, the Nigerian Academy of Science, and invariably all the academies on the continent coming into a network that could serve the basis of development of our continent. Well, the agenda of what we need to do, it's quite long. But one of the lessons that we've learned in the past is that the national academies are poised for responding to national challenges and responsibilities. And then the African Academy, when it came up, did remember that consultations were made between the African Academy and the existing academies then. And I think that Nigerian Academy of Science was also. So the need for partnership had been there. And the need for building continental academies is before us. Of course, NASAC then came up, which is a network of African Academy, first essentially to make sure that countries that had no national academy, NASAC will work to make sure that we increase the number of nations with their own academy, and that those groups will then come up and be able to become a continental academy. So the task before us is NAS, the Nigerian Academy of Science, ready to collaborate with African Academy and with the other academy, how we now start to put this continental network, strengthen NASAC. I saw that somebody was going to speak on NASAC, and I thought I could skip that. But the importance of NASAC is that there is a network. And I think that network is what we must all totally make intervention to make sure that we develop this network of inter-African collaboration and partnership. And I think that's a challenge really that I think I would like to bring to this table, building sustainability, doing it, and defining an agenda for the continental. So I therefore say that what are the challenges? Poverty is still with us, and how can we bring in science for the African reform? I think so there is a need for a continental academy, in a network of continental academy to be able to develop the total capacity of the African. So my parting words therefore comes in simple words. We are here at this conference to explore the potential and the role that the academies can play. And we've discussed the historical evolution of academies as institutions for national development, showcasing how they can transform knowledge, economies, and governance structures. We've shared the experiences that we have gone through. In fact, I think I have some slide that I call academic activities. I didn't have that slide. Okay, yes, we can. I mean, these are some of the things that we have been involved in. I just thought that some slideshow can see what we're doing. And I'm sure all of you as academics are doing it. How can we now come together in terms of how to build a continental internet and network of science academy to be able to set up the agenda? We know the African condition, and we must have a turning point in the African condition. Looking forward as a collaborative academics in Africa, we must advocate the policy action that facilitate effective governance through evidence-based policy making, enhancing partnership between science and governance. Ultimately, we must integrate science and technology into all realms of governance and societal development, positioning the partnership of national and continental academies as vital entities in contributing to a scientifically informed and prosperous continent. Academies are viable institutions for national and continental integration, improving the human potential through specialized skills in science and technology, and bringing the African continent in line with the global agenda of civilization that exclude no region in the world. The tools and knowledge to realize such an agenda are at our disposal through the network of partnership and collaboration among African academies, poised for continental development of improving the human condition and the advancement of civilization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ogumala, who is currently the Chancellor of Leeds University. And he is the past president of the Nigerian Academy of Science and foundation chair of ICSU, Regional Committee for Africa. He's, it's written here, he was a professor of chemistry. I think he's still a professor of chemistry, as far as I'm concerned. As an academic, until we are gone, we are still what we are. And as they say, with like bottles of wine, the older, the better. So chemists, they react, from what I'm told. So you're still reacting. So you're here with us, and we thank you for all. Thank you for the history you've given us about the Nigerian Academy of Science. You were president 21 years ago. And we're quite glad that you have the history for us. And interestingly, we're going to have someone else who became president 10 years after you did to talk to us again about his own role, both past and current. So we'd like to invite Professor Tomori, who, as I said, is also the past president of the Nigerian Academy of Sciences. He was 2013, I think, 2013 to 2019 as president. He's a virologist, or a veterinarian too, so don't count that against him. But he's a fantastic virologist who continues to preach a lot of policy and development around the world, and particularly in Africa. He's been asking us to change our ways, that we can't continue to do the same thing and as every year and expect a different thing, that we need to move up and make sure that science takes the center stage in any development. So he's going to be speaking to us about one of his pet ideas. And like I said, he believes that we should address the problems of Africa rather than address them. Please help me to welcome to the podium Professor Oyewale Tomori.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I promise you I'm not going to undress here in your presence. One of the things being a president of the Nigeria Academy does to you, it gives you gray hair very early in your life. You can see my elder brother there, you know. Another thing I discovered here, I think the best thing we did in Academy is to elect a woman as our president. And I'll tell you why. I actually told her, I said, what she has achieved in the 4 years is more than what all the rest of us men presidents have achieved. And she's really done great. And I was listening to Liz on Monday, and I saw the way she was talking. I think we make a great mistake keeping our women in the diaspora of our development. We should bring them in, and they do great work, much better than women. So I think it's something to say. And then the last thing, before I say what I want to say, one of the advantages of staying in a luxury hotel like this is that it brings you the joy of the past. When I came in here, there was no towel in my room. So it took about 16 hours to get the towel. Because I couldn't wait any longer, I had to go and take my bath. And then I remember when I was young, when I was escaping from school to go and swim, we didn't used to use towel to dry ourselves. We air dried ourselves. So I stayed on the 4th floor, opened my window, and air dried myself because there was no place for me. So that's the luxury of coming into this kind of luxurious hotel. But I'm going to be talking about oneness. Is it on? My slide? Oh, okay, thank you. Oneness, that's, you bring in wonder, what is oneness? It's to look at us in the West African region. Next slide, please. Or am I supposed to control from here? Okay. So I'm going to be calling what is oneness. I look at the historical antecedents, and I also look at what are the contemporary issues we are facing, what are the challenges, and also look at future, where we're going as oneness. Are we competing with other networks, or are we going to be collaborating with other networks? And then I quickly conclude. Next slide, please. So let's go. And those of you know, it's time for us to go on. Let's talk about oneness. Next. So the story started not yesterday, 2012. It took us 12 years to inaugurate oneness. And we begin to see some of the reasons why. It was actually the ministers of education, science, and the head of states of ECOWAS who had seen what TOAS, us, I mean, you should be glad that even my ministers know what us has been doing. It's very strange, but they only know about what goes in their pockets, not. So, it was what they saw, what us was doing, NASAC and all that. I said, you have done to national development. They took a resolution and then said, we in West Africa must also have a network like those other ones. And one thing with government or leaders, when they take a resolution, it doesn't mean they want to do it now. It means they are hoping that if they get re-elected, they will do it. If they don't get re-elected, then forget the resolution. Anyway, so they came up, no, I didn't finish now. You give me, we have plenty of time. So in 2019, 7 years later, they came again to that resolution and then said, we must do something about it. And of course, that's what happened. So they told us to establish a West African network. Then in 2019, almost that same year, they recruited Professor Kwaku in Benin Republic, Nobel, and I myself were supposed to go. That's one of the problems with our region. We speak different languages, so you have to put a French-speaking, an English-speaking, and languages together, which is one of the problems. I think we need to begin to. I had a colleague of mine from the French-speaking side, and I was kind of apologizing to him that I couldn't speak French, and he took it to think that I should be sorry for that, and he said, "How come you cannot speak?" I said, "Both of us should be ashamed that we cannot speak our mother tongue, and we're speaking in somebody else's language, and that's the problem we're having. Until we begin to realize that we are just like our keynote speakers talked. Those ancient things, we need to go back to them. The ancient knowledge of our people, the ancient culture of our people, build back better on those. It's not everything in the culture that is good, but there are great things in them, and we need to build that better. And that's the foundation we need to lead all our network, because integrity, issues of integrity, honor, and things like that, those are the things that were in our culture, which I think we need to build back up, even our science. So next slide, please. So we're to review the constitution of all the other networks, see what are doing, how they set up, what are the activities they're doing, and how can we then not just copycat, but adapt all those things to suit our own environment in West Africa. So we developed the guideline for establishing this network, and then circulated these draft guidelines to all of the academies that we knew in West Africa at that time, all the different groups, for them to make comments, so that it wasn't just something we gave on them. So on those guidelines were sent back, then they sent them back to us, and we then prepared these guidelines and forwarded it back to the ECOWAS group. This is the guideline we're setting for ourselves. 2019 on the 2023. Next slide. So come back 2023, we then continue the work, and then this time we are now preparing a draft constitution, which we're going to use for running the WANAs. Again, we recirculated this to all of the presidents of the academies in West Africa for their comments. And later on, somewhere in that year, we had a meeting in Cotonou, in which all of this became to validate the constitution. And it wasn't then on the 2024 that the WANAS was officially inaugurated in Abuja here. Can I next slide, please? And so these were the 8 countries at that time. 8 countries are represented, academies are represented at that meeting. We had 3 who couldn't come because of the quarrel in West Africa. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. You know all the history of ECOWAS. But they joined us online. Unfortunately, they couldn't come personally because my president was waiting at the border to drive them back, because they are not part of ECOWAS at that time, which is all stupid, because it's all politics. That nothing to do. Science should go beyond politics. It's for the good of our people. And if scientists can do something great, we shouldn't let politics come in between us. Unfortunately, at this meeting, those 3 couldn't come because my country will not give them visa. I think Liz was talking about visa on Monday. These are some of the issues that we need to speak boldly about. We are scientists. Sometimes we are too tame as scientists. We want to be politically correct. Now, that's a wrong thing. I think you better be politically incorrect. That's when we're ever going to get anything done in our own different places. And many of you serve on government committees. I know you are always politically correct because you are afraid they won't appoint you a second time. Go back there and do your work. You are not serving the minister. Like I told my minister once, I'm not serving you. You are just an agent. You appointed me to serve my people. So it's the people that I'm serving. So when I say contrary to what the minister believes, if my people believe in it, I'm doing a great job. And if I had to come a point when I had to tell the minister, we gave you 8 recommendations. You have not done any. And you're asking us to make recommendations, which our initial recommendation will have sorted out. And then I used one word. I said, you make us look like useful idiots. And that's exactly what we are. You are useful to them because they use your name. Oh, Tomori is serving on my panel. But when Tomori gives the advice, don't mind that idiot. And that's what they saw. They turn us into useful idiots. We shouldn't allow them to do that. We're serving our people. We're not serving God. We're not serving the minister. So I think this is a message. Next slide, I beg, so I can quickly finish. That's the map. Those of you who have done geography. Don't mind about the red one. It's not that they were not out there. You see, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger couldn't come because of the political problems in West Africa. The other countries, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Gambia, Liberia, and Sri Lanka, don't really have an academy as such. Again, this is part of the job the ONEUS will be doing in future. Next slide, please. That day, it was a day as if we had masquerades with all the academic gowns that came in. It was terrible. I mean, it was so colorful. You know, you couldn't believe that. That's one thing I like about academic gowns. They come in different colors. Even Joseph in the Bible was not as well dressed. Next slide. These are other people who didn't wear academic gown. So these are the normal people. The rest is over there. Next slide. So they elected. This was proper election. There was no rigging. There was no INEC. But we all got inside. And every country that attended had something to do. No, not just whatever. But that also created its own problem. The secretary is in Cote d'Ivoire. When he speaks, I don't understand what he's saying. I had to use Google Translation to get his message to me. These are some of the problems we're meeting. I mean, I better tell you. Next slide. If you think you saw this picture yesterday, don't. My minister has about 10 pieces of this dress. The cap and this was what he wore on Monday, Tuesday. This was what he also wore when he came in April. So he has plenty of them. So don't think it was yesterday's picture I put here. So he came in, and we got a lot of publicity. The Nigeria urges ECOWAS scientists to leverage SCI. Next slide. You see the world at last, there was a network of activists in this, and that was on the TV and other things. Next slide. So what I'm trying to say that we got I think we need to look for this type of thing, because if you don't tell people what you are doing, then nobody knows. And then, but you must do something that will make a difference in their life. Then you are relevant. Next slide. I think there's one more of those in this. Wake up now. Next slide. Okay. So, what action are we taking so far within this period, in spite of the fact that we just started newly? We're working to get an observer status, just like AAS has with AU. So we're also trying to get an observer status. We're learning from you, so these are some of the things. I think we need to begin to learn from each other. What have they done right that we need to do? You do the same thing. So we too are trying to get an observer status with ECOWAS, for at least at the beginning, because the funds we need will have to come from somewhere until we are independent ourselves. So that's one of the things. We are making efforts also to diversify our funding. We've been talking with private industries, oil companies, philanthropists, and we're talking to them because we're not going to depend on ECOWAS, because there's also a problem. The man who is giving you money, you have a little bit of difficulty to tell him that he's stupid, even when he's stupid. But then that's the problem, We have signed an MOU with ECOWAS on this priority problem that the ministers and the head of state themselves have identified as the problem. And we as scientists have done that. So we're all talking from the same point. So the MOU we are signing is to look at those specific problems, not just a scientific thing or conference today and talk about whatever. What are the problems? The word is relevance. How are you relevant to the needs of your people? And who else will know but the politician, the people themselves? So we're not staying in the hall. We're saying the ONEUS must get out to the people and talk with our people to resolve some of those issues that science, the problems, so that our science can be used. Next slide, please. One of the areas we're focusing on is the issue of science communication. We actually said that. I think this is coming up from some of the things we are talking about. Unless people know what you are doing, you are of no use together. And one of the problems with our science communication comes in paradigm, especially in the terms of diseases. So many rumors and things come out. You that have the scientific study, you must go out and engage. And I always keep saying that. You don't let all these people occupy this year and tell lies about them. When they are telling lies, you immediately, I do participate in a lot of TV interviews. And when the reporter who is asking some questions which I know are not true or rumors, I tell him straight or hard, straight to the face, that is not correct. The correct thing is this, and that's part of the communication. We need to get people, and because we have the fact, we have the information, we should be out boldly. When people are telling lies about something, go out there and fight it. Nigeria is having a problem now with the papilloma vaccine, which also, I mean, those of you in Nigeria, they know one TV station that is so popular, they call it Berekete. If you want any wrong information, if you want to find anything, go there and you say it, and everybody carries it. But we need to be challenging those things, and that's why we are focusing on science communication and as a part of this, and also getting engaged with the don't mind some of the spellings there. English is not my mother tongue. So we are engaging the government and parliamentarians and policymakers in our region so that we are not neglecting them. We're also saying they are part of this. And that's most important. We are very willing and we are eager and we are ready to collaborate with more experienced academics like AAS, the NASA, and others on issues that affect our region and the entire African region. Next slide. Okay, so far, the areas that we've discussed in our group, and we say, look, time has come for us to improve surveillance and talk about surveillance this. And I give you one of the reasons. You remember what is happening about monkeypox now? Africa is clamoring for vaccine. The vaccines are not there. Even when they are there, they are donated. To get an agreement with the Japanese government with the monkeypox vaccine they have, it takes anything between 6 months to 9 months to get through all the diplomatic discussions. Are we going to wait and let our people get in because while we're waiting for Japan to give us? And you remember the problem with Ebola? Ebola started in one part of Guinea in December. The world did not know until March of the following year, and that's why it spread. When it came to Nigeria, we knew on time, and we acted on time. And when everybody thought Ebola in Nigeria was going to kill all of us, we had only 20 cases. It came out of simple surveillance, simple contact tracing, simple isolation of the people, lab diagnosis. When you put this as strength, Africa has had enough epidemics to be able to have the strength. Why are we not focusing on those strengths? Why are we begging the world for vaccine? If you do the surveillance at the beginning, then you won't get into a state where they say it's international concern. And if you have a national concern, why are you waiting for WHO to tell you that you have a problem? Why should we wait for WHO to declare that this is a concern when it actually I know that it's a concern in my house? And these are things I think we as scientists, we need to begin to get up together and talking about. Don't wait for the world. I use one word. Maybe I shouldn't say it publicly, but I will say it if the chairman will allow me. But I'll go on. So sustainable integrated management of water resources. Those are the things, especially, many of you know Lake Chad. There's no more Lake Chad. What has happened? And this is one thing that affects virtually all of us in the West Coast. That's one of the things we are putting our hand, and we're planning to about 4 or 5 countries in the region are working on this one. Those are areas. Next slide. This was actually the Nigerian Academy of Science that is talking with our colleague in Benin on how we can relate together. Benin Republic is just next door to Nigeria. One in Berlin, they divided us. My great-grandfather, who speaks Yoruba, is now in Benin. My great-grandmother is now in Nigeria. And we are 2 different countries, but we are speaking the same language. Because I listen to Radio Benin, and I understand what they are saying, because they are speaking my language, yet they are different countries. We need to begin to come together. Next slide. I will talk a little bit about that. The Ministry of Science and Technology's budget, our own, was 11.05 billion naira. But look at that one. It includes 1.5 billion allocated for the construction and rehabilitation of a road way somewhere. According to that money was given to SHEDA. SHEDA is the government agency that focuses on promoting education in science and technology. Then they got budget to go and build a road. Are you beginning to see the type of thing we should be talking about and telling our people rather than listen and hear it and then laugh over it? We're laughing over it. No, these are things we should challenge. Challenge. How can you give road construction to Sheda that is supposed to start teaching people, girls about this thing? Next slide. So, again, look at the budget for my country. You see, there are three, I pick up three groups. STI, that is Science and Technology, Education, and our almighty National Assembly. I put the population. STI, all these things is 200 million. Education is 200 million. National Assembly, did I say, sorry, that's an error. It's not populating, it is population. Yeah, but if you think it's looting, that's your own concern. So look at it, and there are only 465 of them in that looting spree. See what they got. SCI got 180, the 465 people got 345. I'm talking of billions, not kobo. Then in the year before, see what he's talking about. And we sit down, look at this budget, and we don't make comments. We don't. It's our duty as scientists to look at these type of things and go and challenge these things here. And when you call out for public debate, we don't go. It's our duty, and I keep saying it. And when we talk on radio and say something, oh, Tom on this mouth is too big. Of course, that's the only thing I have. I'm not big. I only have big mouth. But that's it's compensation by God. When you see short mouth like this, the mouth will be big. Next slide. I just want to wish all of you my very best, and thank you for even inviting me for this audio. A Merry Christmas. And you see that tree? That's the kind of bounty thing I want in your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tomori, for that. I just learned about the new spelling of population, which is interesting, and that's. But let me just say, I'm going to open it to the public now. We have good time, about 30, 45 minutes to look at some of these things. But let me make comments on three things that were mentioned before others, because I'm sure others will have more ideas on this. You were talking about no towel somewhere, no towel in the rooms. Somebody's going to ask me, when I used to go to the stream in the village to bath, did I have towels? So if you translate that stream into this hotel, just imagine that is a big stream. So don't worry about it. Don't just worry about it. But I'm glad they responded now with towel. And in any case, isn't it better to dry yourself openly than to use the towel that will have all the germs it will have taken from other people? I'm not too sure if anybody has done the research on the germs that the towel they put in your room, transmit to you. So perhaps that's another way. Just come out and shake yourself and move on and do something. But I hope that they will get the message and do something. The second is getting governments to be involved in what you are doing. One thing is to caution the trend issues or the currency of what we are doing. The president of Nigeria has just been inducted into our, as a grand, which means a lot. Not just a patron, but grand patron of science. He loved it. It's all in the papers. Cash on it. Immediately think of an idea and write him a letter thanking him and praising him for all that and hoping that he's going to get more votes, but you want to get this from the grand patron. You have to follow it up immediately. That's when he can react. If you don't do it, he'll forget it. Next year, he will just say, oh, I remember they gave me this. Where is that academic gown that looked like I'm going to be a masquerade? I know that. I've worked with government, so I know how they think, how they relate. If we do it really now and hit on the head, what he will do, as I've heard when I was in government, is to say, oh, these are votes. Oh, yes, so these are votes for the next election. So you're already cashing it on it, so let's do that. That's number one. Even if you ask him as a grand patron of science to build us not a headquarters, but laboratories. So put it that that's what you need to do your work. Don't just say you want offices. You need laboratories, and create, even within the laboratories, you can now create your offices or something like that and build it for whether for the West African group or for any other group somewhere where everybody can go and practice. The third one is something that I hope that the West African group will look into this seriously. I just read, or did I hear, that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they want to permanently leave ECOWAS. And I think some of our colleagues from those nations are here. But let us insist that as far as we are concerned, we don't see them as ECOWAS, we see them as West African scientists. So they shouldn't leave. Even when the nation leaves, they should not leave. And I think our friend from is it Burkina Faso or is it Mali? He's here, and I hope he's going to comment. He's going to convince us that he's not leaving. So with that, let me open this to comments and suggestions. And please focus your comments on what we must do next to make things better. Where's the way forward for African scientists, African science? Yes, sir. So number one was number two, number three, this side. Number four, I need one more to be five. One more. Okay, let's start with Professor Asante then.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Most honor is my name. I just want to react quickly to what you've just said, Prof. And I want to assure you that when the Nigerian Academy of Science went for that induction, because it was an event that had been planned for long. So we went with only one agenda for the president. We recognized that there were also other academies, and they may not have the opportunity that we had to interact with him. And we know there is a problem in Nigeria, especially in science, but not only in science, social science, all education, which is funding.
Yeah.
As at present in Nigeria, TED Fund, the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, is the main funder of the universities and federal and state, that's got public universities. And you know there are a greater number of private universities now in Nigeria than these public universities, and they don't receive TED Fund grants, not directly. So funding of research was the only request. Creation of the National Research Fund or Council or activating it, and he bought it. And that program, I know, he gave it to 2 or 3 ministers, and I know they are running with it, hopefully. So I'm just saying that we knew, and it was an opportunity that was not going to be missed. Okay. So, and the president, I'm sure that will react or respond to votes next time around and so on, if they do it. So the Nigerian Academy of Science did the homework for the rest of us. Okay. And I hope so.
Thank you very much for that wonderful information and intervention.
I was in that meeting, sir.
Intervention. Okay, you are a living witness of that. That's great. What I would still suggest again, sir, is that you follow that up with a letter and with a visit to the Chief of Staff immediately. And then you now go to TED Fund. You have to visit TED Fund and tell them who you are. Of course, they know. But TED Fund manages the national research, this is now. In fact, at the moment, they are assessing projects or whatever it is, proposals. Tell TED Fund that you are the Oga of all these ones. So while they are setting money aside for research, they should have a bulk sum for the Nigerian Academy of Sciences. And they will do it. I can tell you that if you push it, TED Fund would do it. I mean, I don't want to say that TED Fund has got inflow of quite a lot of money that we can get, and we can also put it in another side. So it's possible to do that. But there's another way to do it, to move on with the president, is to form a tripartite development of science in Nigeria or in Africa where you involve the academies, the government, and the industry and the private sector. So there's no reason why you cannot have Bua, the sugar something, or Dangote oil, or Danjuma's, or whatever, and bring them all together and say, this is what we want to do. How can you participate in this for us? So that's one way to do that. But when we get to talk, I will give you some ideas I was able to snap from government on how to get them to support what you are doing. I'll do that. I'll share that with Professor Okenufua, as how to do that, because I was secretary to a government in this country, and I know how they behave. When you are reading something, any speech or any small document or memo at the executive council, the governor or the president will not just, he'll be looking at other things. But as soon as he hears you talk about Naira and Kobo, he wakes up. And that's what they are looking for. So we need to do that. And I hope that will happen. So thank you for that information. We'll follow it up. Yes, my friend from
Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso.
Yes, my name is Paco Sereme. I am the current president of the National Academy of Science, Burkina Faso, and also member of IS. Before coming to the issue we may have faced belonging to ONEUS, I will start with one big concern I have. By listening to the two presentations, it clearly appeared that in Nigeria, your fellow are committed. It appears that your fellow are committed. This is, for me, is not the case for the fellow of IS. So maybe you can share the experience you have on that, because it is really a concern for me, being a member of the governing council of IS. I see there is not much commitment. Look at in this room, how many we have as our fellow. We are very few. I am here. I am the vice chair for West Africa region. If you remove the vice chair of the other region, I cannot say that there are many fellows who buy the ticket and come to the meeting. There are very few. So the commitment is a big issue. We have to solve that. Okay. Now, coming to the issue with ONEUS, I was really involved in the process, and I really thank Professor Tomori and Norbert Onkunu, because our concern was, if they say this is a network for ECOWAS country, we will leave. But fortunately, we have the vision of two leaders, and we came to the conclusion that we should not call this network of ECOWAS country, but network for West Africa.
Scientists.
Yes, scientists. So I think we will be involved in the activity, and as he has presented, there is no issue, and then we think we will support the network and work together. So that was my experience on that.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that you are confirming that even though there's going to be a shift in the ECOWAS membership, the scientists should regard themselves as one. We practice one science in different countries in West Africa, and nothing should divide us. Thank you very much, sir. Number 3, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Bonnie Alaneme. I'm a science journalist. I'm not a professor yet, aspiring to that, towards that soon. I'm also the publisher of African Science and Tech Digest magazine based in Abuja here. My take is just two issues that gives me concern, seriously. For the past 20 years practicing as a science journalist. One is I discovered, going back to creation by God, God, after creation, gave man the responsibility to not only populate, but also to manage the earth. And I believe that the set of people at the forefront of that managing the earth are the scientists. Are we really doing that in Africa? And my question to that, in that regard, is to what extent, or how soon this prolonged marriage between the gown and town will come to fruition? Because it has lingered so much in my thinking. I've visited so many research institutions, not only in Nigeria, and some other parts of West Africa. And that marriage have not yet taken place. It has lingered so much. How soon are we expecting that? Because the researchers, the scientists, and the industry are facing opposite direction. And it worries me a lot. Because I have actually interacted with these two groups. And it keeps saying, talking different things. Especially the industry don't seem to believe what the scientists are doing. What the scientists doesn't speak the language of the industry. They don't understand what the industry needs. Why the industry needs them so much. So I believe that this marriage needs to come soon. We need to fix this marriage feast in Africa so that we make sure that science, technology, innovation works for Africa. Now, my second take is what Professor Tomori just mentioned concerning science communication. It's another area that worries me so much. Yes, some of us in the media, especially few of us that struggled a lot, to have a passion, for science, even though having science background. But to bring it into communication is another a very big problem, because without, even in our various families, without good communication system, there will be chaos in the family. Talk more of a community or a big society, a continent like Africa. So we need to design a serious and effective communication plan to make sure that science, technology, innovation work for Africa. It's high time to do that. Otherwise, we'll wait for another century before we ensure that our effort in the scientific endeavor, impacts on African economy. So that is because there's a wide gap, very wide gap, and keep on widening every day. We need to bridge that gap. And to do that is communication. We need to plan it. And we in the media are very willing to partner with you. We are not just an errand, but partners, to make sure that we support your work. Just yesterday, just a story that our president in Nigeria, went to commission a project at the Immigration Office. And that project is about technology. Maybe because it was excited that a center was named after him, BAT Center. That's Bola Ahmed Tinubu Technology Center. He went there, commissioned, and was excited and all that. But that's a product of science. He was not here, though he sent a Minister of Science to represent him. So, but being a grand patron of science in Nigeria, I believe that if we have this proper communication system, to make sure that we write a story or tell the story of science in such a way that everybody will understand and follow. Because the way you communicate science, in the classroom should not be the way you communicate in the market. Yes. Market people have their own language. Yes. Likewise those on the street. I just discovered something recently that even the Babalawers, those traditionalists or herbalists, have taken it upon themselves to do their own communication. That's why you see them in the market, on the street, with their microphone and all that, selling their market. So why can't we come up in our, laboratories and ivory towers and show that because I'm proud of scientists in Africa, the best brain you can think of in the world. That's why when they go out of the shores of the continent, they excel, because that's resilient and they are in them. Yeah. But home here, we need to design that communication system to make sure that science works for Africa. And thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you raised 3 issues. One is to have the town and gown to come together in an effective and efficient partnership to promote science. The second you raised is that for us to be involved right from the start, at the forefront of any endeavor that has to do with science and technology, in Africa. We must be in front there. Our visibility must be number one, okay? The third is communication of science, which you have said, and I think I agree with you. That way, I hope that, again, the AAS will look at that aspect of it. Popularization of science is key in Africa. Because we are here at this level, things are made easy for us. You can look at it. Not many people along the street understand what that science is talking about. You just go drive on the highway, Asokoro, Kubwa. On the right-hand side, you see a lot of people selling fresh fish. I have stopped there once or twice, and I looked at the fresh fish all in the daytime, in the afternoon. I did not see one single fly. I told them I won't buy. Okay, come and buy. And I said, I don't go buy. I don't see fly here. The man said, now fly you want chop? I said, no. With the fly being there, I know that the thing where you sell, you don't get chemical. He began to understand what I was talking about. So we need to do that. There must be a popularization of science at the street level for them to understand. Who tells me that when you ask these boys today, what do you want to do? I want to be a footballer. I want to be a guy, design something. I want to be that. I want to be an event manager. They don't want to be anything, or some of them want to be Yahoo. Who tells you that there's no science in the football? Ranging from the physics of it, to the chemistry, to the biology, to the biochemistry, to the pharmaceutical. Who tells it? Can't you trace it? We can. For the footballer to understand, for the person who wants to be a footballer. What I'm trying to say is that let us reduce science to the level that the ordinary person understands in his language. Then he knows that, this is what you are talking about. So I agree with you, and I hope that this is something that we'll look at it. Perhaps one other thing we need to look at, and I'm sure some of you agree with that, is that, you see, we just don't live here tomorrow or next day, and then we forget about it, and we dust our files in the next conference. We must have action plans that are timed chronologically. Once we leave here, this is what will happen. In a month's time, this is what will happen. In 3 months. And then we have groups that are working on them and other people who are pushing and checking whether this is happening. Unless and until you do that, this will just be a talk show. We'll go back again, sleep, and come back and, I remember that one professor, is it Tomori, said something about it. That's all. Number 3, or number 4, I think. Who is an expert? I think somebody, yes, sir.
I think it's over here.
Oh, I know. I think, did I? Were you number 3? Do you mind? Let's have him and then it comes to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. My name is Aminu Bello. I'm from here, from Sokoto State, but I'm Jaffa. I'm now working in Canada.
Oh.
Great presentations today from one of our eminent scientists in the lab, chaired by your very good self, sir. So I have 2 observations and questions as well. Based on the presentation made, to see extremely low investment of our governments into scientific development. For a country like Nigeria, which when you put the economies of all other equal countries together, Nigeria is 10 times that, but it commits less than 1% of its total GDP into science and technology in 21st century. I think we are not ready as yet. So, sir, we have very eminent scholars here, eminent scientists who have seen it all, who had been there right from the foundation of the Nigerian Academy of Science. And you are also as the chair. You've been with the government chair of Kogi State government. I read about you quite a lot. You headed the Association of African Commonwealth Universities. So, taking from all what has been said today, how do you synthesize all this information to really make it pragmatic, to work with leaders, politicians, to get the political buy-in, to really get a true commitment into science in this country was African sub-region and Africa in general. Otherwise, we're not going to make significant stride into the future to get Africa the position it deserves to be across the world. So number two is also the issue of knowledge generation, which is one thing. We're all academics working in our laboratories, in our classrooms, on wards, healthcare workers, and so on, producing knowledge, doing research. Any research, of course, the purpose is to promote human development, social, economic development, any kind of research. So there needs to be knowledge transfer, knowledge translation. That knowledge generated in laboratories across our universities need to be translated to benefit people. So how do you do this, sir? You've been the leader of the Association of African, you're very modest, you didn't mention it, but we know that you led the Association of African Universities. So how do we get all this together, all these major stakeholders, academics of science, not only of Africa, West Africa, East Africa, and so on, working together with our universities, with our research institutes, and the government to really translate the knowledge that we generate in our universities directly to benefit socio-economic development of our countries. Food security is important in this country. Physical security is important. Of course, agriculture has been mentioned. Healthcare has been mentioned. We need to really work and drive our own technology to support ourselves. Otherwise, all we've been talking about will be merely theoretical, present papers in seminars, and it doesn't really lead to anywhere as far as development is concerned.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You raised some good points too, but I will leave it to Professor Tomori to answer because he's got a lot there. But yes, you mentioned Association of African Universities. I was Secretary General, right? And we did a lot of work. But what we did was to get every president in every country to be part of what we're trying to do. And I do hope that the people there continue, but we need to network. AAS need to network with AAU a lot in almost everything, and that will help to generate that. So let me now give room for the two ladies here who wanted to say something. You had the president and then another one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I got so excited to make my comment that I lost count. Who was in line to ask the next question. My name is Magdalena Skipper. I'm editor-in-chief of Nature, and I'm a guest here at this event and enjoying it enormously, so thank you for the invitation. I was really impressed by Professor Tomori's call and comment about the engagement of researchers and research community in general in the political life. So in Nature, we write actually quite a lot. One of the functions that I strongly feel we fulfill is to support research and research community in calling on governments, decision makers to support that enterprise. Yeah. Now that support is not going to come easily without the research community reaching out, critiquing in a constructive way. This was, when Professor Tomori spoke, you of course spoke in the context of Africa. The same problem I find is global, that there is a large constituency in the research community who believes that science is somehow apart from politics and scientists should not engage in it. Yeah. My view is that this is an idealistic and unhelpful view because, of course, as the last couple of questions illustrated, science does not unfold in a vacuum. Science is part and parcel of society, and of course, politics are of society, by society, and for society. So my question is, how can we, the research community, the academies, support individual researchers to engage, to give them courage, to advise, critique constructively, so that future policies, future decision-making is made together. Exactly as you said, togetherness is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've stressed partnership, and I will allow, sorry? You didn't hear what, oh, they did not. Yeah, I think they, she was trying to talk about the partnership, and you mentioned a lot about, what the West African group is trying to do, your action plan, your objectives, or whatever. How do we get the cooperation, the support of everybody, including institutions, to be part of what is going on? I guess, is that a good summary of what you said? Yeah, something, no, you can say it again. It doesn't matter. We can take 1 minute from our computer, yeah, because I think it's important.
Partnership is absolutely key. I guess my emphasis was about the engagement of the research community in the political life. Okay. That's what, Professor Tomori, you spoke about in particular. I felt that was something that resonated with me, because many researchers feel they should stay aside from that. I feel they have so much to contribute and so much to guide spending, future decision-making, that it will be productive for everyone, for the whole society, for the research community to be engaged in the political life as well.
Yeah. Again, she's saying the engagement of the local scientists, or all our scientists, in doing research that relate to societal problems that are current, that are trending, rather than the esoteric kind of research we do, all in the name of publishing outside of Africa, or attracting money that has nothing to do with us in Africa. I think that's the sort of thing. How can that be relevant? I think it's relevance we're talking about of our research work. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take just 1 minute off you before we go to increase our sugar level with the tea. Oh, sorry, the president wants to say something before the two gentlemen make their comments. So, Madam President.
Thank you very much. I actually want to thank the speakers and our chair. I think it was thought-provoking. It was brilliant presentations. And it's a very important discussion we're having. It's a pity NASAC's not here, but then I have to also say, back to communication, I think scientists are not such good communicators, and we do not follow up. So I think it's a misunderstanding. But 2 weeks ago, there was a similar conference from NASAC and all the academies in Algeria, and we were not there. And it's a very similar situation. The time to change is now. We cannot leave at the end of this without having actioned a specific task that will enhance our network. We must work together, and I take the challenge and the opportunity that we form a stronger network with NASAC and all the academies, and we reach out to those countries who do not have academies of sciences. We need to help each other, and I think that's where that best practices need to be shared, and that's where we can learn from each other, I think, in the academies. I think a very important space, and I think the discussion about the science communication platform is a brilliant idea, because as scientists, we actually do not have the skills to communicate, and as scientists, we do not have the skills to talk to politicians. And here we have experts that know how the game is played. And it's time that we need to get out of our silos, and we need to go more horizontal. And this is the opportunity and the platform. The people who's here cares. And that's why I want to thank everyone that's here today and for the week. And I hope you all will attend tomorrow, because tomorrow we will share a lot of what we've discussed today with you, with our vision where the AAS want to take all of us. And I think that's a very important point. So I want to just thank the speakers and say I took extensive notes, and I will follow up with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll just give 1 minute each to the panelists, just 1 minute to round up and whatever you want. I know you didn't hear much of what was said, but the little you want to respond first? Just respond.
Well, I'm so delighted that this session has been quite engaging and bringing everybody on board to be able to respond to the challenges of what science, how we can use science to drive the African situation. Partnership, connecting with others at all levels of society. And I'd really like to also even look at it. Science and technology as an institution is a huge, institution that is also embedded in financial reward. We still order litmus paper, if we still use it, from abroad. Curiosity from a young, growing, less than school set can start making litmus paper by developing the reagent and soaking papers and drying it. Have we forgotten that? If we take the water from the Atlantic Ocean and we label it saline water, it's good enough for cooking. After all, the salt we import is imported as solid. We still have to dilute it to the level of the taste bud. So science itself is engaging in our daily lives, and we should all embrace it as a culture of living, a culture of growing, and a culture of being prosperous. And I think all of us has been shown by the first session we had. We are all inbuilt scientists. Inotep is a scientist. So where is the science in us? How do we exhibit it, and how do we draw potential to improve the human condition? It's the responsibility of all of us. And of course, I ended up my sins just like Schrodinger. They asked him whether the cat was alive or dead. And the answer is, it's in your hand. So it is in our hand to use science and technology for the development of our environment, of our community, the growth of our children, the prosperity of our nation, the survival of our continent. I think Africa should not be left behind. We must reverse the equation. And the participation of each and every one of us at whatever level. The person who turned me on science was my mother. She didn't go to school, but she was curious in telling stories to her little child, describing the only thing she knew, the man in the moon. And I was fascinated by this man. I wanted to meet him. I became curious, looking into the sky. Every child has that potential. And every growth in everybody, there is that potential. Let us all embrace this culture of curiosity, finding out and accumulating knowledge, and using it to improve the human condition. Partnership at all levels, from the day we were born to the end of our life, is a continual scientific adventure to improve mankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Professor Tomori, do you want to say one sentence or 1 minute? Which one do you want?
I'll take both. My brother from Burkina Faso, we did not call it ECONET. We said West African Network of Academies of Science. So, and that's what we fought for. At that meeting, there was our brothers from those 3 countries participated online. So it's a West African thing. It's not an ECOWAS thing. But at the beginning, we started with ECOWAS, and we're making an effort to free ourselves from the bondage of ECOWAS. That's number one. The other issue was about town and gown. Unfortunately, we scientists, we are sewing winter coat for our people in the hot sun of Africa. And that's a problem. The other one, you made a mention about let's bring science to this. I said, We should elevate science to the level of the people. And that's the message. It's not that we're bringing science down. We elevate science to the, because that's the purpose of science, for the good of the people. Capacity building. We talk so much. Since I was born, it's been capacity building. But we never talk about capacity retention. We need to create the environment for those young people who are trained to be able to stay. I stayed because there was something for me to work with. So I can see the two on both sides. Finally, I want to also thank my mother, because she caned the hell out of me. And that's why I'm what I am today. If not for that caning, I would have been a bandit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our panelists, for the wonderful time you have given and throwing us some issues that has excited the fellows and everybody else. So I guess that this will continue while we're having our tea and coffee and whatever it is. And we'll please seek them out and ask more questions or have more interpretations. I realize that a few people in the audience didn't have the time to make their comments, but we are coming back again for other sessions, so you should be ready to present your own ideas or talk about your sessions there. So on behalf of everybody, I want to thank both of you. As they say in the language you understand, and one of the ones I speak, Adupeo, Amariba. Thank you very much. So we do hope, and thank you everybody else for being part of today's exciting activity. Let us go for coffee, or tea, or zobo, or whichever one is available. Thank you. Or water, thank you.